All right, so I wanted to share something that happened just to show you that I still make mistakes. Things still happen, and instead of getting upset and beat up about it, I'm going to use it as a little learning experiment. So, with this sculpture, you can see I have a little clip underneath here, and what happened is the weight of this sculpture actually fell and broke. And so, what I'm going to do, well, first off, let me leave that up there like that. The reason is I didn't have any support underneath, but the main reason is because of all the added weight. So, with oil based clay, with monster clay or Chavant, things like that, you won't really have this issue. With water based clay, the problem is that the clay was still soft when I added all this extra weight. And so you have all this weight on just this little bit of clay here and hanging on around the face. And so the biggest thing that I can suggest to you guys is as you're sculpting, before you start adding on shoulders and adding on the neck, is why I always that's the reason I always start out with the face. You work on the face, you add a little bit, then you add a little bit of the neck. And then after it starts to harden up, you add on a little bit more of the shoulders and you build it out slowly. The problem here was that the clay was still super soft and I it felt like longer because I worked on it over the course of about 4 days. However, this is probably about um, maybe 2 hours in, something like that, just because I did the first session of trying to capture Eliza's likeness. I did a couple 35-minute segments, and then I did probably another 2 sessions, another hour on kind of giving her a better expression and then, turning her into the party goblin. However, I wasn't, I added all this in thinking that the clay was a little bit harder than it was. And what happened was it was obviously too heavy. While I was working on it, it was fine. However, I put the bag on it, left it, looked out in the morning, and this was down on the ground. So, however, I'll show you because I still enjoy this piece and I want to play with it some more. So I'll show you guys how to fix this and how to prevent it in the future. The biggest way is as you're working, and this is something I need to remember myself, is after, I start working on it, leave it out and don't always cover it right away, depending on how long you've been working on it. That way it does have time to dry a little bit, especially before you start adding on extra weight. The other thing is just to add on like a clip or something else that you can put underneath just to help support that extra weight if you are putting this on faster. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to shift it to a different board just because of the fact of what I'm going to do is create a base for her, and doing a larger board will give me more space to do that. And I always shift whenever I create these pieces because I'm not sure how tall I want it or things like that. So what I have here is this is another pipe, but this one's actually PVC, so it's cut down a little bit. So I wanted her to be a little bit shorter than she was on this piece. And this again can be found at the hardware stores, but this you would still look in plumbing, but they actually have it. These are actually made for like underground, like sprinkler systems. But the nice thing about them is obviously that you can cut them to get an exact height instead of using the steel ones, which are you have to get a new pipe and they only come in 12 or 18 inches or every 2 inches. So you kind of have bigger gaps. All right. So I will deal and fix this. Come on. Alright, so we already have two pieces. It's already been split. I'm going to take this piece off. Now, just kind of slide this on. Now the other thing is get this out of the way. Kind of decide on the height I want. However, this clip isn't super strong. Let me grab another one just to kind of help. The other thing you can use is if you have 2x4s kind of chopped, and that'll help support and brace it a little bit more also. Actually, I'm going to kind of leave it right about there, I believe. And with doing this, with fixing it this way, I don't have to put it at a certain height with the pipe. I just need it to make sure that it's supported because it's not going to be hanging anymore. I think this right here will actually be a pretty good height. And still not, that's not going to work. All right. So, I'm going to have it up to about right there. Nope. Now these are also just temporary holders as you figure out the height that you want and just extra support. However, depending on how much clay you have on there, you don't want to trust these. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use these to figure out how high I want it and to help support it. But I'm going to actually grab clay out to kind of build up the base. And so if you're using water-based clay again, and you have clay that isn't super soft, that you can kind of build up the base, that would be the best. However, use whatever clay you have on hand. So, sometimes what I have is I have clay in my buckets that, I just were old sketches that I kind of took apart that I'm kind of waiting to recycle. And that's what I'll have here. Or clay that was in another sculpture that I'm not using. What this will do is, since this is a little bit more dry, it'll give you a little bit harder of support. There we go. And building this up, this clay will hold its shape, and the weight from the sculpture won't be able to slide down and break anymore. So try to brace it as much as you can around and in front of the clips. And then I'll take those clips out and I'll fill in around them. And this clay, also make sure that you squeeze it super tight around that pole so that you don't have too many air pockets or gaps. It's just gonna that's just gonna help to make sure that it's stronger. Now later on, as I work on this, I'll build this base out depending on how big I want it, or if I'm going for a certain design or whatever, I'll kind of even it out and make it wide. But right now, I just want to make sure that there's enough to support the weight of this piece. All right. Oh, that's okay. That was just her ponytail. It was actually only, it wasn't really connected. It was just kind of laying on the back of her shoulder. It was more connected to the top of her head. But that'll just get added back on as well. Come on. All right, a little bit more back here. Okay. All right. And now, all right, so this basically fits right back where it was. What I'm going to do is just kind of wet down a little bit the edges. Don't get them too crazy, but just kind of spray them real quick. And as you can see, since it was a clean cut, this actually, there's a few pieces that are kind of pushed out or messed up. And what I'm going to do is actually, that's where this piece came from. All right. So now that it's together, you're just kind of going to push and kind of blend it together. However, the best way to make sure that you have a stronger seam is to kind of take a tool and all these areas that you've kind of pushed and blended together, kind of dig out a gouge right at that line, just to kind of make sure that you'll see that inside it's together, even though you have a line on top. And then what you're going to do is take some of that clay and just kind of press it back in. What that's going to do is create a little bit of a tighter seal, because some of these areas you'll have a crack and it'll go deeper than just the surface. So pressing it together and then kind of digging in a little bit and filling it back in, it's just going to help to get a stronger bond. Now there are some areas that are going to definitely have to get reworked and fixed, especially because where it broke was right at the brow line. So I will retake her her eyebrows, and I'll have to work a little bit on the area right below her eyebrows, right above her eyes. I'll have to kind of rework that a little bit more. But other than that, she actually still looks okay. She still has the same look, the same everything else is still together. Except I'm noticing now that her chest is a little bit, you can see here, is a little bit too up and angled. So after I finish this, I'll take that down a little bit. And then I'll kind of do the same thing with the back here. But here, I'm going to have to remove some of the clay that was pressing this up. Alright. Just press that down. I think she can. Alright. There we go. Alright, so this is going to take, I still wasn't anywhere near complete, but this is still going to take more tweaking and more fixing just to kind of get it right. But you can see how everything has been, for the most part, repaired. Now this hit here, and actually might have been this part. Yes, it was this part that ripped. So just a quick spray. And that just gets pressed right back on. And then I'll go through and fix that also. But you can see certain areas here I'm obviously going to have to go in and fix. I'll redo her eyebrows. But everything underneath here is all supported. So there you go. Now, obviously the goal is to not have this happen. However, even if something like this does happen and you decide you want to save it, you still want to work on it, this is one way that you can kind of bring it back to life. Even if the top of the head's up here and you walk in the next day and you want to work on it more and the whole head, the whole face fell. Now there's other ways to do this, and with classical sculpture, that's why they use butterflies and other types of armatures. However, you're limited to what you can do. You can't pick the head up and move it and shift it to a different sculpting stand, to build a base if you want to do that. You can't pick it up and tilt the head to kind of change expressions, which is why I still use it this way. However, the biggest thing to remember is that And I'm going to have to kind of, because this has happened a few times, so I have to keep this in mind as well. But as you're working on it, sculpt it, and if you're not spending a lot of time, if you're just doing really quick sketches and studies and it's not drying out, then give it some extra time to dry on its own. That way, when you add on extra weight of the neck, extra weight of the shoulders and the chest, then what you can do is you'll make sure that this is actually dry and you won't have that issue. Now again, oil-based clay, they don't have this issue, but water-based, because it's still wet and it's still soft, you're just adding so much weight that it's just pulling on this little bit of clay right around the crown area. So hopefully this has been a little bit of insight and fun times, and it's helped at least a little bit. But that's how you guys can go about and fix and repair. That way you don't have to do the entire sculpture over again. However, there's certain things that are sticking out to me now that are a little off, and I may do another round just to have fun with it and see if I can kind of knock her likeness a little bit more. But as she stands right here, it's saved, and it still has a pretty cool character and look to it. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. Thank you guys for watching, and hopefully it helps you guys.